أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي ربي يسر ولا تعسر وتمم بالخير آمين يا رب العالمين.
In this lecture, we will study the 5 types of maful. There are a total of 5 types of maful, and maful will always be mansub. Let us now start studying these 5 types of maful. The first maful that we will study is called maful bihi. Please note that maful bihi is the maful that we have already studied in this course. When we studied Jumla Fi'liya, we studied that Jumla Fi'liya will have at least 2 components, Fi'il and Fa'il, and that every Fi'il will always have Fa'il. Jumla Fi'liya always begins with the Fi'il, and Fa'il will always be marfu. Fa'il is the one performing the action. We further studied that Jumla Fi'liya may or may not have maf'ul. Maf'ul is the recipient of the action. Maf'ul will always be mansub. And we further studied that maf'ul can either be a personal pronoun, ism zamir, or maf'ul can be a noun or ism zahir. So this type of maf'ul that we have studied, which is the recipient of the action in Jumla Fi'liya, is called maf'ul bihi. The terminology for this maf'ul is maf'ul bihi. We will look at the following example. خلق السماوات والأرض. In this example, khalaqa is the combination of fi'il and fa'il. Fa'il is huwa. Khalaqa can be translated as he created. What did he create? As-samawati wal arda. As-samawati wal arda is the recipient of the action or maf'ul. As-samawati wal arda is mansub. Wal arda is clearly mansub, and as-samawati is mansub because we know that ati ending sound in feminine non-broken plural will either indicate mansub or marfu form. And we know this is mansub because it is maf'ul. Another example is khalaqtahu. In this example, khalaqta is the combination of fi'il and fa'il. Khalaqta can be translated as you created. Fa'il in this case is anta. Who in khalaqtahu is maf'ul or recipient of the action. The translation of khalaqtahu can be you created him. Who is a mansub personal pronoun that is playing the role of maf'ul. Therefore, as-samawati wal arda is an example of maf'ul bihi in the case of khalaqa as-samawati wal arda, where as-samawati wal arda is the recipient of the action. Similarly, who, which is a mansub personal pronoun in the case of khalaqtahu, is an example of maf'ul bihi. Who is maf'ul bihi because who, that is him, is the recipient of the action in Jumla Fi'liya. The first maf'ul that we studied was called maf'ul bihi, and the second maf'ul that we are going to study is called maf'ul fi. We will use the following example from the Holy Quran, Surah number 71, ayah number 5. He, that is Hazrat Nuh alayhi salam, said, My Rabb, indeed I invited my people to the truth night and day. If we pay attention to this ayah, first of all, we will see the use of da'awtu. This is an example of fi'il mazi, that is fi'il in the past tense. This is a combination of fi'il and fa'il is ana. This is a marfu personal pronoun. Huwa huma hum, hiya huma hunna, anta antuma antum, anti antuma antunna, ana nahnu. Da'awtu can be translated as I invited. So we have covered our fi'il and fa'il combination, and fa'il is ana, that is a marfu personal pronoun. Next we move to qawmi. Qawmi can be translated as my people. Let us analyze qawmi further. Qawmi is an example of maful bihi. I invited my people. I is the fa'il and my people represents maf'ul. But now we are not just going to say maf'ul, we are going to say maf'ul bihi. My people or qawmi represents maf'ul bihi. Qawmi is the recipient of the action, that is the recipient of the invitation. Qawmi represents mudaf mudaf ilay combination, that is qawmi plus ya with the sukoon on it. Please note that in the case of qawmi, we don't see al, we don't see tanween, and ya is a majroor personal pronoun. Ya is a majroor personal pronoun that is being used as mudaf ilayh. Please recall that this particular ya will only accept zair before it. Please also note that qawmi will appear the same in marfu, mansoob and majroor forms. So this qawmi will be written the same whether it is marfu, mansoob or majroor. It is its particular use within the sentence that will help us determine its designation. Meaning that if qawmi is used in a jumla fi'liya as maf'ul bihi, then we will give it the status of mansoob. So that brings us to the final part of the ayah. What is laylan wa naharan? Laylan wa naharan can literally be translated as night and day. So we have already covered our fi'il plus fa'il. We have covered our maf'ul. Then what is this addition towards the end, that is laylan wa naharan? We already are noticing that laylan is mansoob and naharan is also mansoob. Please note the following. Laylan wa naharan or laylan wa naharan is mansoob. Night and day informs us when the fi'il occurred. So it is giving us information on when the fi'il or when the action occurred. In other words, it informs us what time did the fi'il occur. This is not maf'ul bihi because it is not the recipient of the action. We already determined that qawmi is the recipient of the action. Hazrat Nuh alayhi salam invited his people. He did not invite the night and day. That wouldn't make any sense. So this mansoob addition at the end is giving us an indication of when that invitation took place. The invitation took place by night and by day. So clearly this is not maf'ul bihi. This is not the recipient of the action. So what is this mansoob addition towards the end? Please note that a mansoob ism that indicates the time or place of performance of an action, that is, the time or place of occurrence of fi'il, is called maf'ul fi. Please note that this is not maf'ul bihi. So we studied maf'ul bihi, which is the typical maf'ul that we studied in jumla fi'liya, which is the recipient of the action. And the second maf'ul that we have studied is maf'ul fi. Maf'ul fi will give us an indication of when that action occurred or where that action occurred. To recap, maf'ul fi is an ism or it is a maf'ul that indicates the time or place of the occurrence of an action, or it indicates the time or place of the occurrence of a fi'il. Please note that maf'ul fi is conceptually the same as zarf. We have previously studied zarf in this course, and it would be a good time to revise the concept of zarf. Let us now revise the concept of zarf. Please note that in Arabic, there are some words that indicate time or place. Such a word is called zarf. Zarf is an ism that indicates time or place. Zarf is comparable to adverb in English grammar. adverbs provide context, that is, when or where something happens. There are at least two types of zarf, one for time and one for place. We studied that the zarf of time or the adverb of time is called zarful zaman. Zarf of time is an ism that indicates the time when an action takes place. And we have zarf or adverb of place, that is zarful makan. Zarful makan is an ism or zarf that indicates where an action takes place. Since zarf is an ism, it will always have a status. We know that every ism will have its four characteristics. So zarf's status will always be mansoob unless it is preceded by harf of jar, and the harf of jar will make the zarf majroor. Otherwise, zarf will always be mansoob. We also studied that zarf will mostly be used as mudaf. Our first example is tahta. Tahta literally means under. Therefore, tahta is a zarf of place. Tahta is mansoob. In the Holy Quran, in Surah number 9, ayah number 72, we see min tahtiha. Tahtiha is a mudaf ilay combination. Tahtiha equals tahti plus ha. Tahti is mudaf, and we are writing it as tahti, not tahta, because it is preceded by min, which is harf of jar. Next, we have al-yawma. Again, we note that it is written as mansoob. Al-yawma means today. Therefore, it is a zarf of time. For example, qara'a surat al-kahfi al-yawma. He recited Surah Al-Kahf today. Qara'a is the combination of fi'il and fa'il. Surat al-Kahfi is maf'ul, or we should be specific and say this is maf'ul bihi, and al-yawma is the zarf. Please note the following regarding terminologies. The same concepts apply to zarf and maf'ul fi. When an ism is used to indicate the time or place of occurrence of fi'il, or the time or place of occurrence of an action, we can call that ism maf'ul fi. We can also use the terminology of zarf. So when we are discussing when or where a fi'il occurred, we have the option of either calling it maf'ul fi, or we can also use the terminology of zarf. In addition, please note that zarf is also used with jumla ismiya. When zarf is used with jumla ismiya, then using the terminology of maf'ul fi will not be appropriate. In that case, we can simply use the terminology of zarf. To summarize, when we are using an ism that is indicating the time or place of an occurrence of fi'il, first of all, that ism is called maf'ul fi. That ism will always be mansoob, and we can use the terminology of maf'ul fi, or we can use the terminology of zarf. But when zarf is used with jumla ismiya, then we can simply use the terminology of zarf rather than maf'ul fi. After studying maf'ul bihi and maf'ul fi, we will next move on to our third maf'ul, which is maf'ul lahu. We will look at the following example. وقفت للأستاذ احتراما. I paused for the teacher out of respect. If we break this down further, وقفت is the combination of fi'il and fa'il. وقفت can be translated as I paused. للأستاذ for the teacher. This is maf'ul bihi. So lil ustazi is the recipient of the action, and that is why we will determine it to be maf'ul bihi. This brings us to ihtiraman. The first thing that we notice is that ihtiraman is mansoob, and we know that it is not maf'ul bihi. So what is the designation of ihtiraman? First of all, we know that ihtiraman is not maf'ul bihi. Ihtiraman means out of respect, which means that it cannot be the recipient of the action. That does not make any sense. Next, ihtiraman is also not maf'ul fi. Ihtiraman does not indicate the time that the fi'l occurred or the place where the fi'l occurred at. So we can conclude that ihtiraman is not maf'ul bihi and it is not maf'ul fi. All we see is that ihtiraman is mansoob and we will call it maf'ul lahu. So what is maf'ul lahu? Maf'ul lahu is a mansoob ism that is used to indicate the reason for the occurrence of fi'l. So a mansoob ism that is used to indicate the reason for the occurrence of a fi'l is called maf'ul lahu. وقفت للأستاذ احتراما. I paused for the teacher out of respect. Ihtiraman is telling us the reason for the occurrence of the fi'l. Ihtiraman is telling us that it was out of respect that I paused for the teacher. So a mansoob ism that is used to indicate the reason for the occurrence of fi'l will be called maf'ul lahu. Our list of maf'ul is as follows. Maf'ul bihi, which is the recipient of the action. Maf'ul fi, which indicates the time or place of the occurrence of fi'l. And maf'ul lahu, which indicates the reason for the occurrence of fi'l. Let us study the following ayah from the Holy Quran to understand maf'ul lahu. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah number 17, ayah 31, and do not kill your children for fear of poverty. We provide sustenance to them and to you too. Killing them is a great sin indeed. The first part of this ayah can be translated as, and do not kill your children for fear of poverty. We can break down this section of the ayah into three parts. In the first part, we see wala taqtulu. Let us focus on taqtulu. Taqtulu can be translated as and do not kill. This is a combination of fi'il mudari plus fa'il. In the case of taqtulu, fa'il is antum. Antum is a marfu personal pronoun. Now let us focus on la. This is the la of prohibition or la nahiya. This will make fi'il mudari majzoom. That is why we see taqtulu, which was originally taqtuluna. Now we move to the next part. Awladakum. Awladakum is a combination of mudaf and mudaf ilayh. Awlada is mudaf because we do not see al, we do not see tanween, and awlada is mansoob. Next we see kum. Kum is mudaf ilayh. It is a majroor personal pronoun. Awladakum is murakkab izafi. Awladakum is mansoob because the mudaf is mansoob. Awladakum is maf'ul bihi. Awladakum can be translated as your children. And do not kill your children. This is maf'ul bihi because awladakum is the recipient of the action. At the end of this section of the ayah, we see khashyata imlaqin. Let us look at khashyata first. There is no al, there is no tanween. Khashyata is mansoob. Because there is no al and there is no tanween, we get the clue that khashyata could be mudaf. This is followed by imlaqin, which is mudaf ilayh because it is majroor. Khashyata imlaqin is a mudaf ilayh combination and it is mansoob. Khashyata imlaqin can be translated as due to fear of poverty. The literal translation can be fear of poverty. Let us pay attention to khashyata imlaqin. It is mansoob because the mudaf is mansoob. Khashyata imlaqin is not maf'ul bihi Because it is not the recipient of the action. Fear of poverty is not the recipient of the action. The recipient of the fi'l or the recipient of the action was awladakum, and we have already determined that awladakum is maf'ul bihi. So we can conclude that khashyata imlaqin is not maf'ul bihi. Next, khashyata imlaqin is not maf'ul fi. It is not maf'ul fi because it does not indicate the time or the place of occurrence of fi'l. Khashyata imlaqin is mansoob, and because it provides us a reason for the occurrence of the fi'l, we will conclude that khashyata imlaqin is maf'ul lahu, due to fear of poverty. And do not kill your children due to fear of poverty. We have a mansoob murakkab izafi that is providing us a reason for the occurrence of fi'l, which is not maf'ul bihi, which is not maf'ul fi, and because it is providing us a reason for the occurrence of fi'l, we will conclude that this is maf'ul lahu. To recap, a mansoob ism that is used to indicate the reason for the occurrence of fi'l is called maf'ul lahu. After studying maf'ul bihi, maf'ul fi, maf'ul lahu, we will move on to our fourth type of maf'ul, that is maf'ul mutlaq. Let us study the following example to understand maf'ul mutlaq. Uskurullaha zikran. Uskurullaha can be literally translated as remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Uskuru is fi'l of amr. It indicates the command to remember. Ism Allah is maf'ul bihi. Ism Allah is the recipient of the remembrance. So what is zikran at the end of this section of the jumla? Let us look at zikran in more detail. First of all, zikran does not inform us of the place and time of the occurrence of fi'l. So zikran cannot be maf'ul fi. Zikran does not provide a reason for the occurrence of fi'l. Zikran is not maf'ul lahu. Zikran also is not a direct recipient of the fi'l. We already determined that that is ism Allah. So it is not maf'ul bihi. So what is zikran? Please note the following regarding maf'ul mutlaq. Maf'ul mutlaq has certain rules. Number one, it is mansoob because we are dealing with maf'ul. Next, maf'ul mutlaq is commonly derived from the same root letters as the fi'l in the jumla. So if we pay attention, zikran has the same root letters as uskuru. The root letters in zikran are the same as the root letters that are used to make this fi'l of amr. Third, maf'ul mutlaq is most commonly used to emphasize its fi'l, and we will inshallah study this in the next few examples. Fourth, maf'ul mutlaq is a mansoob ism that is used in jumla fi'liya to emphasize the fi'l, which is its most common use, meaning that maf'ul mutlaq will have other uses as well. These other uses are maf'ul mutlaq can be used to state the number of fi'l or to state how many times a fi'l occurs, and maf'ul mutlaq can also be used to indicate the state, type or nature of fi'l. But the most common reason for which maf'ul mutlaq is used is to emphasize its fi'l. The three basic things that we can take from maf'ul mutlaq are: number one, it will always be mansoob because it is maf'ul. Number two, it is commonly derived from the same root letters as its fi'l. And thirdly, it is most commonly used to emphasize its fi'l. Let us study some examples that will help us understand maf'ul mutlaq further. Let us study some examples in order to understand the concept of maf'ul mutlaq. The following is a hadith of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. It is narrated from Hazrat Abu Bakr, may Allah be pleased with him. I asked Allah's Messenger, peace be upon him, to teach me an invocation or to teach me a dua so that I may invoke Allah with it in my prayer. He, peace be upon him, told me to say, O Allah, I have done great injustice to myself, and none except you forgives sins. So bestow on me a forgiveness from you, and have mercy on me. You are the forgiver, the merciful. In the first part of the hadith, we see Allahumma inni zalamtu nafsi zulman kathiran. Allahumma inni zalamtu nafsi can be roughly translated as, O Allah, I have done injustice to myself. So, why do we see zulman kathiran towards the end? If we pay attention, we will see that zulman kathiran is mansoob. Let us look at this in more detail. Zulman kathiran is a descriptive phrase. It is mansoob, and we are noticing that zulman has the same root letters as zalamtu. So zalamtu is coming earlier in the jumla. Zalamtu is fi'il, and in the case of zulman kathiran, zulman has the same root letters as the fi'il in the jumla, which is zalamtu. Zulman kasiran is not the recipient of the action. The recipient of the action in this jumla is nafsi. Zulman kasiran does not provide context on the time or place of occurrence of fail. Zulman kasiran does not tell us what time the injustice was done to oneself or what place the fail occurred. Furthermore, it does not provide a reason for the occurrence of the fail. So we can conclude that zulman kathiran is not maf'ul bihi, it is not maf'ul fi, and it is not maf'ul lahu. Zulman kasiran is an example of maf'ul mutlaq. In this situation, it is emphasizing the fail. Using zulman kasiran, our translation will become, O Allah, I have done great injustice to myself, rather than only saying, O Allah, I have done injustice to myself. So our possible translations will be, O Allah, I have done great injustice to myself, or I have wronged myself with great wrongs, or I have done a great wrong to my soul, or I have greatly wronged myself. So with the addition of zulman kathiran, which is a maf'ul mutlaq, we are able to emphasize the fail. And the clues for us to determine that this is maf'ul mutlaq are the following. First of all, maf'ul mutlaq is mansoob, and we see that this is a descriptive phrase which is mansoob. Secondly, zulman in this case has the same root letters as the fi'il of the jumla. And using zulman kathiran, we are able to emphasize the fi'il. Another example of the use of maf'ul mutlaq can be found in Surah number 4, ayah number 164. In the first part of this ayah, we see Kallamallahu Musa. In this case, kallama is fi'il, which can be translated as spoke. Allahu is fa'il, and we can literally translate this as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala spoke. And Musa alayhi salam is the maf'ul. But in this case, we will say Musa alayhi salam is maf'ul bihi. Musa alayhi salam is the direct recipient of the speech. And that is why we are going to use the terminology of maf'ul bihi. Kallamallahu Musa can literally be translated as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala spoke to Hazrat Musa alayhi salam. So why do we see the use of takliman towards the end? If we pay attention, takliman has the same root letters as the fi'il preceding it. Furthermore, takliman is mansoob. So we have some clues that takliman might be representing maf'ul mutlaq. If we look towards takliman in further detail, the literal translation is speaking or conversation. So if we were to literally translate this ayah and say, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala spoke to Hazrat Musa alayhi salam speaking, that doesn't make much sense in terms of translation. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala spoke to Musa alayhi salam speaking is not a very clear statement. So why are we using takliman here towards the end? Furthermore, we notice that takliman is a mansoob ism. Takliman is not the recipient of the action. We have already determined that ism Musa is maf'ul bihi. Takliman, which is literally translated as speaking or conversation, does not provide any context on the time or location of fi'il. Takliman does not provide reason for the occurrence of the fi'il. Takliman does have the same root letters as the fi'il in the jumla. And finally, takliman is being used in this ayah to emphasize the fi'il. So our translation will be, to Hazrat Musa alayhi salam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala spoke directly. Kallamallahu Musa takliman. Instead of just saying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala spoke to Hazrat Musa alayhi salam, we are saying in the translation, to Musa alayhi salam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala spoke directly, or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala spoke to Musa alayhi salam with direct speech. So here we understand that maf'ul mutlaq is used to emphasize the fact that a direct conversation occurred between Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and Hazrat Musa alayhi salam, just like how a conversation is done. So here we have another very good example of how maf'ul mutlaq is used to emphasize its fi'il. To recap, maf'ul mutlaq will always be mansoob. Maf'ul mutlaq will most commonly have the same root letters as its fi'il. And finally, maf'ul mutlaq is most commonly used to emphasize its fi'il.
Our next example of maf'ul mutlaq is in surah number 48, ayah number 1. In the beginning of this ayah, we see Inna fatahna laka. Surely we have granted you victory. In this part of the ayah, we see a combination of fi'il, fa'il, and maf'ul bihi. We have granted you victory. So you is the maf'ul bihi, that is the recipient of the victory. And then afterwards we see fathan mubinan or fatham mubinan. The literal translation of fathan mubinan is a clear victory. So translating it as surely we have granted you victory, a clear victory, seems repetitive. So why is fathan used here? Again, we will notice that fathan mubinan is mansoob. It is not the recipient of the action. We have already determined that the recipient of the action, or maf'ul bihi, is already being introduced. Fathan mubinan does not provide context on the time or location of the occurrence of fi'il. It also does not provide any reason for the occurrence of fi'il. A clear victory is not providing any reason for surely we have granted you victory. Next, we see that fathan has the same root letters as the fi'il in the jumla. Fathan mubinan is used to emphasize the fi'il. And the translation will be, surely we have granted you a clear victory. So with the addition of fathan mubinan, we are converting surely we have granted you victory into surely we have granted you a clear victory. So this is another example of how maf'ul mutlaq, which is mansoob, and it does not fit into the other types of maf'ul that we have studied. It
has the same root letters as the root letters of the fi'il in the jumla, and it is most commonly used to emphasize its fi'il. Our next example of maf'ul mutlaq can be seen in Surah number 33, ayah number 41. In this ayah, we see two parts. First of all, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanuzkurullaha. This can literally be translated as, O you who believe, remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Next, we see dhikran kathiran. Dhikran kathiran can be literally translated as much remembrance. The literal translation of the entire ayah can be, O you who believe, remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, much remembrance. Again, this is not a coherent statement. So why is dhikran kathiran being introduced over here? Again, we are noting that dhikran kathiran is mansoob. Next, we will also notice that dhikran has the same root letters as the fi'il in the part of the jumla before it. So this is giving us clues that dhikran kathiran might be representing maf'ul mutlaq. If we pay attention to dhikran kathiran, it is a descriptive phrase or murakkabi tawsifi. It is mansoob. It plays the role of maf'ul mutlaq. Dhikran has the same root letters as udhkuru. It is not the recipient of the action or recipient of the fi'il. That is, it is not maf'ul bihi. We have already established that maf'ul bihi is ism al-laha. Furthermore, it does not provide a reason for the occurrence of the fi'il. Much remembrance is not giving us a reason for the occurrence of fi'il. And finally, it does not provide us context on time or place of the occurrence of fi'il. Dhikran kathiran will bring out the following translations. It will emphasize the fi'il. And now, instead of saying, O you who believe, remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we can create the translation of, O you who believe, always remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala often. This is being created by the addition of dhikran kathiran, where it is playing the role of maf'ul mutlaq and it is emphasizing the fi'il. Or we can have the translation, O you who believe, remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala abundantly. Or, O you who believe, remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with much remembrance. So here we see another example of how maf'ul mutlaq is emphasizing its fi'il. In the previous slide, we studied how maf'ul mutlaq can be used to emphasize its fi'il. That is, just from O you who believe, remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we get the translation of O you who believe, remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with much remembrance. And that effect in the translation is being brought about by the addition of maf'ul mutlaq. So to recap, maf'ul mutlaq is mansoob. It is most commonly derived from the same root letters as the fi'il in the jumla. For example, dhikran has the same root letters as udhkuru. Dhikran kathiran is maf'ul mutlaq and udhkuru represents the fi'il in the jumla. Next, maf'ul mutlaq is most commonly used to emphasize its fi'il, and we see the example over here. To summarize, maf'ul mutlaq is a mansoob ism that is used in jumla fi'liya to emphasize the fi'il, and this is its most common use, which means that relatively less commonly, maf'ul mutlaq can also be used to state the number of fi'il, that is, state how many times the fi'il occurs, or to indicate the state, type, or nature of fi'il. Please note that this represents a less common use of maf'ul mutlaq. Maf'ul mutlaq is most commonly used to emphasize its fi'il. The last type of maf'ul that we will study is maf'ul maahu. Maf'ul maahu is rarely used in the Holy Quran. So we will spend the least amount of time on this particular maf'ul. For a quick introduction, ma'a means with. So if we say zahabtu. Zahabtu can be literally translated as I went. Wa zaidan. I went with Zaid. The requirements of maf'ul maahu are that we will see the use of this waw with zabar on it, which will be followed by a mansoob ism, provided that this waw with zabar on it creates the meaning of with, such as in the case of zahabtu wa zaidan. We see waw with zabar on it followed by a mansoob ism. This creates the meaning of with. This waw with zabar on it is creating the meaning of with, and we have zahabtu wa zaidan. I went with Zaid. In this example, zaidan represents maf'ul ma'ahu. This example is different from what we have studied previously, such as khalaqa samawati wal arda. In this example, we also see waw with zabar on it followed by a mansoob ism. But this does not represent maf'ul ma'ahu. Why? Because in this example, this waw with zabar on it creates the meaning of and. He created the heavens and the earth. But in the example of zahabtu wa zaidan, where the waw with zabar on it is creating the meaning of with, we will translate it as I went with Zaid. And zaidan in this case is representing maf'ul ma'ahu. In this table, we will summarize the 5 different types of maf'ul that we have studied. First of all, we have maf'ul bihi, which is the typical maf'ul that we have studied in this course. That is, it is a direct recipient of the action of fi'il. We have the example, خَلَقَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضَ. He created the heavens and the earth. The heavens and the earth are a direct recipient of the action of creation. Please note that all the maf'uls are mansoob. The second maf'ul that we studied was maf'ul fi. Maf'ul fi indicates the time or place of the occurrence of fi'il. Maf'ul fi can also be called zarf. We studied the example of Surah number 71, ayah number 5, where we saw the use of laylan wa naharan or laylan wa naharan. He, Hazrat Nuh alayhi salam, said, My Rabb, indeed I invited my people to truth night and day. So in this case, laylan wa naharan, which is mansoob, is giving us perspective on the time of occurrence of the fi'il, that is night and day. The third type of maf'ul was maf'ul lahu. Maf'ul lahu indicated the reason for the occurrence of fi'il. We use the example of waqaftu lil ustazi ihtiraman. Ihtiraman is a mansoob ism that is giving us perspective on the reason for the occurrence of fi'il. I paused for the teacher out of respect. So ihtiraman or out of respect is giving us a reason for why the fi'il occurred. Our fourth maf'ul was maf'ul mutlaq. It is commonly derived from the same root letters as the fi'il in the jumla, and maf'ul mutlaq is most commonly used to emphasize its fi'il. And we use the example of the hadith of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, where we saw the use of zulman kathiran. O Allah, I have done great injustice to myself. Here, the use of maf'ul mutlaq is emphasizing the fi'il. Zulman has the same root letters as the root letters of the fi'il in the jumla, and zulman kathiran is mansoob. Finally, we studied maf'ul ma'ahu. Ma'a means with. This is rarely used in the Quran, and the clue is that we will see waw with zabar on it followed by a mansoob ism, provided this waw with zabar on it creates the meaning of with. And we studied the example zahabtu wa zaidan. I went with Zaid.
سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك